To be a really good leader, you need to be a shape-shifting leader in order to weave individuality into a powerful group culture. And that means knowing not just your people, but yourself.
Hey everyone, before we get into this week's podcast, we got a pretty cool announcement to make. You are now able to connect with us. We have a pretty cool little widget that's on the website. Just go to paultaylor.biz/podcast. And near the top of the page, you'll see a little icon that says send a message to the Paul Taylor podcast. So what we can do with that, you just click on that and then you send us an audio message and we will get the audio message. Now, the first thing I want to do with using it is actually do an Ask Me Anything episode. So all you got to do if you got a question that you want me to cover is just go to paultaylor.biz/podcast, hit on start the recording, and then send us a message about what you would like me to talk about in the Ask Me Anything and leave your name. We will call it out on the show. I'll get that all put together. And the other thing you can do is just leave us a message about what you like about the podcast, what you don't like about the podcast. Did I talk too much? All of that sort of stuff. And just give us some feedback. And we will use that to continuously improve. So looking forward to hearing from you. Now, on with the podcast. Marie Anderson, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much, Paul. It's great to see you.
And so whereabouts are you in the States right now?
Yep, I'm in Southern California. Los Angeles area, specifically Manhattan Beach. I'm a beach person.
Oh, yes. I spent a summer in Los Angeles many moons ago, working at Venice Beach. It was bloody fantastic, especially for a boy from Belfast.
Is that right? Where are you? So you're from Belfast, live in Australia. So what were you doing in Venice Beach?
No, we were traveling. So we took a year off. We were traveling around the world and we went and stayed in LA for 3 months. And I was working in a fast food place on the boardwalk and it was absolutely brilliant. So yeah, there was a bunch of us and we had a great time in Venice Beach. So it was been, Jesus, 30 odd years ago.
That's fun. And about 30 years ago, in 1986, I was in Belfast dancing. Yeah, exactly. Having a wonderful time there. And Australia as well. I think that was the same summer. So, wow. Yeah, we've been missing each other around the globe. I like it.
Indeed. Now, you are a sports broadcaster, as they say in the good old US of A, as we will know as a sports commentator for ESPN, probably the biggest sports channel in the world, I would imagine. So tell us, how did you actually get into that? Was that something that was intentional from an early age, or did you just kind of end up there through happenstance?
Well, I think I always knew I wanted to be a journalist of some kind, mostly by default, right? I hate math. I really didn't enjoy any kind of technology, all those things. So you get kind of narrowed down. I have 4 older brothers, Paul, and I had no choice but to watch TV, whatever they were watching, which was always sports. And I always say that I fell into sports broadcasting because it was the combination of the two things I loved the most as a kid. I loved sports. And my older brothers tell me that I was a world-class tattletale. And so I figured sports reporting, perfect. The two things I was good at as a kid.
What's tattletale? Storyteller, is it?
Tattletale, no, it's telling on your brothers. They snuck out this window at this time. You know, did you know that they were doing this? It's reporting on all the things that they were doing that I probably shouldn't have been sharing with my parents. That's a tattletale. Sports and tattletale and sports reporting. It's perfect.
Excellent. Now, so you have now written a book called Cultivating Audacity. How much of that really reflects your own personal experience of taking bold risks in your life and your career? Because you don't get to the top of the tree without taking some bold risks.
Yes. And I don't think it came naturally to me. And that's part of the reason I wanted to share with people in Cultivating Audacity, because it really was my journey in taking more and more risks, working certainly in a male-dominated field. I had some tragedies along the way where I watched a young colleague pass away right before he was starting his dream job as a sports center anchor, and that really shook me. I performed CPR on him unsuccessfully. It was awful. He was 6 days into his dream job and newly married and very fit. and 37 years old, and an aneurysm took it all away. And at that moment, I decided if you could have all those things going for you and have it ripped away, I was never, ever going to wait for anything again. And that really changed my perspective. I was a young woman at the time, 23 years old. And I decided at that moment, if I didn't know how much time I was going to have, I was going to take bold risks and keep going. And if I didn't succeed the first time, I'd try again and again. And it changed my life, and my entire career has been built on Audacity.
That is really interesting, actually. I had 8 friends killed in a helicopter crash that then was the stimulation for me to leave the Navy and actually reflect a little bit on my own mortality. And I then decided that I wanted to do something meaningful with my life, which is how I ended up where I was. But often it does take that bit of a shock, doesn't it, to kind of jolt us out of just kind of going through the motions. You kind of realize, holy shit, life is pretty freaking precious, and you've got to get out there and get after it, right?
Yeah. Well, and if you've been privy to it, right, that because we've all been told it, but if somebody has said to you or you've seen it happen, all of a sudden you're like, wow, it really can happen in a moment. And I've never forgotten. His name is Peter. I've thought about him all the time. I've stayed in contact with his family, actually. And I decided I kind of owed it to him. He was 37, and it was at 37 years old I started to make even bigger risks in my life. That's when I decided to go all in on being in front of the camera instead of producing. That's when I had my first child. Like at 37, I considered everything beyond then bonus time.
Yeah, that's it. That's interesting. Now, I want to talk about taking risks and the interaction with luck, right? So there's probably lots of people have said to you over the time, geez, you're lucky. You've got a great job, right? Professor Richard Wiseman, you've probably never heard of him. He's a UK psychologist. He's been called one of the top 50 most important psychologists of the modern era, right? And he studies all sorts of stuff around human behavior, but has done a series of studies on lucky people, in inverted commas, right? And unlucky people. And he actually, there's a little bit of a story behind this, but he put an advert in the paper in the UK asking for lucky people and unlucky people to come and do a series of experiments, right? And because it's the UK, he got a bunch of lucky people and then he got a shit ton of unlucky people, right? But put them through a whole series of experiments and actually showed that lucky people actually have no more opportunities. They're just more attuned to the opportunities, and they actually take risks. So they actually notice more stuff around them because they have that kind of mindset in the first place. And when they see an opportunity, they jump on it, whereas unlucky people tend to go, oh, that's never going to work out for me, or that's too risky, or that's too dangerous, right? So what's your kind of personal view on this, what you've noticed over time? And what do you think? We'll just leave it with that for now. What's your observations around this?
I love that. I think that's so brilliant because I'll expand on that and say a lot of people consider any kind of outcome different from the one they want to be failure, right? So they think, oh, I failed, when really it's about getting experience or data. So for somebody who's lucky, right, you're in this job, if my job is lucky, well, how many times have I been rejected for a job? How many times have I failed on air? And I use that in air quotes because to me, it's all just data now. But somebody who's unlucky, maybe they wouldn't come back around and try a second time after they were bad because they would say, oh, I tried and I
There you
failed.
go. Yeah.
Bad luck. And for somebody who considers themselves to be lucky, right, using that same branding, we know it's really about perseverance and persistence and preparation and all those things coming together. But failure, for me anyway, doesn't really exist. It's information to keep me driving towards, or redirect me perhaps, towards wherever I'm supposed to be.
And I think if a young man named Thomas Edison had seen failure as a signal to give up, we wouldn't have friggin' electricity, right? Because he said he had 10,000 experiments and that, other people would call them failures. Now, that plays in quite nicely to you talking in the book about two lives, the one we dream of and the one that we live, right? And so we've just talked about the luck factor in inverted commas. What do you think? What are some of the things that determine who gets closer to the life that we dream of? Because there's very few people who are living the perfect life that we dream of, right? And I remember an old saying when I was going through my military training: no battle plan ever survives first contact with the enemy, right?
Oh, I love that.
And the
I
enemy
love
is life, right?
Yeah, exactly. Can we also call that parenting as well? Right? You have your plan and then something comes in and you're like, okay, well, that didn't go as I thought it was going to go. I love that. I'm using that. I think what separates people is the ability to dive into the vision of it. This sounds really strange, but like everybody has their different way of going to bed. And I believe, like when I go to bed, I think about the life that I want, right? Which is what I'm living now, but it's always evolving. So I picture myself. Here's the book coming out. You mentioned I have a book coming out. So the success of that book and where that leads me. And I think if you're able to really envision, sounds simplistic. Some people call it manifesting, but if you're envisioning kind of what your life is and then willing to take the action to get there, and that's the difference, then you can get there. Because I talk about audacity being based in three different ways. Okay. There's the mindset, which is really, Paul, just optimism, right? Just the optimism. If you're down by 12, I spend my life in sports. If you're down by 12 at the half, why do you come out and play the second half? Because you're hoping maybe if your team gets their act together and your offense starts working, whatever, maybe you'll win the game. Maybe you won't, maybe you will, but you're optimistic that it could happen. But if you don't come out for the second half, nothing's going to happen. Same way if you sit on your couch all day long, eating chips, but being optimistic as hell, nothing's going to happen. So until you take that action towards the life that you want, then the optimism isn't going to do anything. So for me, I think about it as an audacious identity being the consistency of the mindset, the optimism of I can do this. I think we can do this. And the action of here's how to do it. When those things are consistent, then you have that, what I would call an audacious identity, which would be the life that you want, or the way that you put it. I love it. Is just air quotes lucky. Yeah, you're so
Yeah.
lucky.
Yeah, that's right. And it's like lucky people, it's like a duck on the water, right? All people see is the duck. They don't see all the shit that's happening underneath, right?
Yeah.
But I love that you combine that mindset, that optimism and action, right? And I think that's the difference between that manifesting and then intentional action. And probably the big difference between your book and The Secret. Do you remember that book? Where you can manifest anything and you just need to will it and stuff like that. Like, yes, that's important. It's important to have goals and dreams and to visualize those things. But you can't just sit there and wait for the universe to drop it in your bloody lap, can you?
Yeah. No, it doesn't work that way. And the thing that I found in researching the book and writing the book and certainly living parts of it is that there's always something in our way, right? There's always an obstacle that's going to stop us or dissuade us if we're not persistent enough. It's that person saying, oh, I'm unlucky there. And it tends to be one of the same four things, either fear, time, money, or your inner critic. And people want to avoid those things like the plague. Well, I'm afraid. I definitely don't want to feel fear. But when you flip some of these things on their head and you start diving into them instead of pushing them away, I think that's where the magic happens. And it's the same thing that you're talking about with The Secret. Like you can manifest in your head all the time, this is what it's going to be. But unless you're willing to get your hands dirty and get some information about what works and what doesn't work, which is going to mean failing sometimes, and you're not going to go anywhere.
We're going to get into all of that stuff, particularly fear and overcoming that. But I just want to double click on the optimism thing. I remember reading about all the prisoners of war in a prisoner of war camp called the Hanoi Hilton.
Yes.
You may be familiar with it, and particularly Jim Stockdale, who's a bit of a personal hero of mine. And what came out of that from the psychologist interviewing all those guys was that particularly when you're faced with adversity, so there might be a difference here, but when faced with adversity, having the Stockdale paradox, which is where you
hold two seemingly opposable things in your mind at the same time. One is a
Yes.
belief that you will prevail in the end, regardless of your circumstances. And at the same time, you got to confront the most brutal aspects of your reality. But if we dial that down a little bit, that whole idea of realistic optimism, right? Not everybody can be a sports broadcaster in ESPN. Not everybody can be an astronaut. There's a bell curve for lots of different things. So how much do you, or in researching the book, did a level of realism actually come into it when people are visioning their goals? Or are you more like just vision that shit and work towards it, even if it seems outrageous?
No, I think it's an excellent question, and it's a really important one. I'll tell you this. I love to garden, right? I think gardening is beautiful, and I think the world needs gardeners, and I think the world will pay for people to create fantastic gardens. Nobody is paying me to garden. I kill everything. Every plant I touch dies. So that's not an attainable dream for me. As much as I would love to, maybe be able to do that. So you have to come back. Have you heard the Japanese concept ikigai?
I certainly have. My wife has studied Japanese psychology, and I interviewed a brilliant guy, Professor Ken Mogi, on Ikigai.
Exactly, right? So they consider, and again, you can westernize some of the concepts to boil them down to be very simplistic. I talk about something kind of similar because I don't like it to be just one thing, but there's some questions you can ask. What are you good at, right? What does the world need? What do you love to do? And what can you be paid to do if it's your career? And, once you kind of dialed out through those things, and the way that I talk about it in the book is more of a freedom funnel because there's a number of things that I want to do. Some of them are paid and professional, right? My public speaking, my book. Some of them are not. I like to travel internationally. I like to spend time with my kids, introducing them to different cultures. But you have to be realistic in terms of what are you good at first, and then what do you love to do? I personally would love to be an astronaut, and I've told my kids that a million times, and they've said, "But you wouldn't leave us to go to the moon." I was like, "I would. I'm sorry. I really would." They call me irresponsible when they were young and everything. They'd be like, "You can't do that. You have little kids." And I'd be like, "But it's the moon." But I can't add or do any of the mathematical calculations that you might need if you are in space. I'm not sure I would pass any of the physical components. Like, I may love it, but I'm not good at it. And for realism, to your point, you need to figure out the answers to those questions, or through the freedom funnel is what I would call it, with all the same kinds of issues, to figure out what is something where you can contribute to the world. Because to your point, yeah, not everybody is meant for every job, but I do think that everybody has something in their wheelhouse that they could really enjoy and give to the world if they were able to uncover it and face. I mean, I love what you're talking about in terms of, war heroes and facing the uncomfortable truths too, even though, to get to that survival.
Yeah, I love what you said there. I mean, I've often said to my kids, not everyone can be an astronaut. And I said to my kids, people who tell you can be anything you want in this world are full of shit. I think that's the wrong message. I think the right message is you can be the best that you can be if you work your butt off and you have targets and goals, right? And that seems to be very aligned with your message here. Now, that obviously then comes into fear. You mentioned fear earlier on. Fear, self-doubt. So many people are paralyzed by that shit, right?
Yes.
So and you talk about it a lot in the book. So what strategies do you recommend for people who are paralyzed by fear?
I separate fear and the inner critic, even though they're closely related, as you allude to. Because fear can be of anything: rejection, failure, exposure, right? Embarrassment, judgment, whatever it is. I recommend people fail right away. Go fail. And I know it makes people uncomfortable. Fail fast, fail often. For me, my first time on live television, which was not the plan, was in 70 million homes. 70 million, my very first time on live television. Yeah, that's not good. That's really not good. I was supposed to be on this little regional sideline reporter thing in the middle of America, but somebody was ill and I filled in for them. And it turns out that it was in 70 million homes. And then I had 5 of those, and it was terrifying. And I was absolutely sobbing outside the stadium, right? Professional broadcaster, my first time on the air, in tears outside the stadium, crying to my husband, saying, why did I do this to myself? I had such a nice life. Why did I want to do this? And, he did the thing that we all say, right? Which is, what's the worst that can happen? People love to go to like, what's the worst that can happen? And I'm like, oh, you want to know the worst that can happen? I'll tell you the worst that can happen. The worst that can happen was that not only will I never get another job on air, I can live with that, but that I'll never be able to produce again, because I have been a producer for 6 Olympic Games and heavyweight title fights and big shows. I'll never get hired to produce again because the people that I produce for will see that I can't do their job and they'll never trust me. So I'll lose my career entirely. My ex-husband's name is Matt. I was like, Matt, I'll lose my entire career. And being so miserable without a career, you will have no choice but to leave me, because I won't be able to be a good parent to our children who haven't even been born yet, mind you. And I will die destitute and alone. And Matt was like, wow, you went there. And I was like, yeah, that's the worst that could happen. So I tell them to catastrophize it all the way to see how absolutely ridiculous that is, and then go out and do it anyway. Because I was afraid of being bad on air, which I was. I was afraid of being embarrassed. I was judged. I was afraid of not getting hired again. Well, I did get hired again. And I went out and did it again. And the only thing that was better about the second time was that it wasn't the first time. Right? And doing it.
Very cool. Now, you also talk about, so we talked about risks and taking risks, right? And you talk about reckless risks and risks that are worth it. So can you kind of expand on that? What do you mean by that? Give us some examples around, and how can people use this to sort of guide themselves?
Sure. Well, you consider your circumstances. I was working with a client who was in business and he wanted to be a realtor. Right. And realtors, I think you call them the same thing, real estate agents.
We call them real estate agents. Yeah.
Real estate agents. So you're paid when you sell a house. And when you don't sell a house, you do not get paid. And he had 2 young children and a wife and a family to support. So for him to just quit his job and declare, I'm going to be a realtor before he gets a license or anything else, would be reckless. But it could be worth it if he was prepared the right way. And he said to me, well, I'm afraid I'm going to fail the test because I haven't had time to study for it. And so I asked, how much is the test? $60 US. Okay. How many times can you take it? Unlimited. I said, great. Step 1, go take the test. And he said, well, I'm going to fail. And I said, that's fine. Go fail the test. And he said, on purpose. And I said, well, it sounds like you're going to fail it because you're not prepared. So he went out, took the test, failed it, and said, now what? And I said, now you're not afraid of failing because you've already done it and survived it. So now let's talk about what you need in order to pass it. And for him, it was time to study, right? He just couldn't find time to study. So some people can do it all in one block. Most of us have incredibly busy lives and we can't do that and everything seems urgent. So we created some space for him throughout his day. One of the spaces was when his kids were in the bath. And he told his wife, I'll help you get them into the bath. You give the twins the half-hour bath. I will study for the test during that time. And I'll be back in time to put them into bed, read the book in bed. And so he did that twice a day. He had 2 different periods, one before they got up and not. So he was able to create the success for himself by studying. He failed it a second time, and then he passed it on the third time. Well, now it's no longer a reckless risk. Now it can be worth it because he has studied, he has the material, he's passed the test, and he has enlisted his family in his success. So that for me is the difference between a risk that is reckless and worth. If he was single without kids, go for it, buddy. Just go take the test, do whatever you need to do with your obligations, a little more planning. It depends on your circumstance.
And then with failure, so we talk about failure. People either avoid it like the plague, this fear of failure, right? But that whole attitude, you win or you learn. How do you help to shift people? Do you talk in the book about shifting people from that mindset? Because so many people I know who just don't do stuff because they're afraid of failure. How do you help to move people from that fear wrapped around failure to looking at it as, what we talked about earlier on, which I love, is an experiment to get yourself some data, right? To learn some stuff, to move you forward, like you did with this real estate guy. But how do you nudge people in that direction when they are just obsessed about not feeling?
Well, you look at the potential outcome. I mean, look, if you're happy with your life, this is what I'd say to them. If you're happy with your life the way it is right now, then don't change a thing. You're just going to stay the same. Questions are, though, you've come to me and you're talking to me about something you want to change. So in order to change, there's going to have to be some experimentation, some risk. What is the worst that can happen? Catastrophizing. And, working with a client recently, she was going, oh, and then this is going to happen. So she got to the point where she said, and then I'm going to be passed out on the floor. And I'm like, okay, so you're in your interview for the job and you're passed out on the floor. And then what happens? And she finally said, okay, that's probably not going to happen. And I think it's when you make your feel your fears so extreme that you realize that's not really going to happen. You're not going to win an Emmy your first time on air, and you're probably not going to lose your job. So when you have desensitized yourself enough to rejection, because that's an ego thing, right? You get rejected, and that's an ego thing. But like when you're driving on a mountain and you see guardrails, you're not insulted by them saying, this road doesn't think that I can drive on this snowy road without some kind of protection or guardrail. No, you're like, okay, that's a guardrail there. And if I hit the guardrail, then I know I need to recorrect. I need to correct myself. When you can teach them that failure isn't the end of the story, it is something that you can make friends with and experiment into, then they become desensitized to it. And I know this because I had the thinnest skin in the world. And I got to the point where I would actively seek out rejection, and I still do it to a degree. When I'm looking at prospecting speaking gigs, I will go for the very biggest thing possible where failure or rejection is the likely outcome, just to have that experience so then I can move on. You know how sometimes people will have like the one big thing that they want to do, so they dance around and try all the little things because the big thing's too scary, and what if they fail? My advice is the opposite. Go fail at the big thing. Go get rejected by the big thing first, so then you can work on all the little things, the little steps that maybe will lead you back there, but maybe it'll lead you in a different direction altogether.
And how much of that is about, you mentioned the ego, is about desensitizing the ego to failure and actually realizing that, hey, when you fail, the world doesn't freaking end?
Yes. I think a lot of it is. I mean, I think of it, you've got, it's back to when we were kids and learning about the id, the ego, the super ego, right? And so the id says like, I've got this crazy idea. Like, let's go do this. And, your ego really is supposed to be the referee working between your id and your super ego. So your inner critic, that inner voice, is really your super ego that's there to keep you safe, that says, well, that's too risky. You'll never do that. You're not qualified enough for that. There's people that are better at than you. You're not ready. You'll just, voice. When you start separating those voices a little bit, you're able to see them for what they are. I just had this discussion with my 12-year-old daughter on the way to school this morning again, because I was like, that's not you, that thought that's telling you that you can't do this. That's literally just somebody trying to keep you safe from failing at it. It's outside of you. And she said, no, it's me. And I said, well, would you go to your friend Alice and be like, Alice, seriously, you suck at math. You're horrible. And she's like, well, of course I wouldn't say that. And I was like, well, so you're probably not saying it to yourself. It is just a singular thought, one of 45,000 that pass through your mind every day, 75% of which are negative according to statistics. So choose a different thought. Seems easy, but if you can't do 7th grade math, who cares? Maybe you won't be a mathematician.
Yeah, indeed.
Go to the class. It starts in 40 minutes. Go to the next class. See what happens there.
So we call in our house, we call that inner critic your inner gremlin, right?
There you go.
So and the gremlin it's just that voice, and it's always there and often trying to protect you, but it's negative, it's apprehensive, and it often gets in your way. But here's the issue. Lots of people pay too much attention to the gremlin, right? And I'm such a big fan of attention. My kind of wife first highlighted it to me. In Japanese psychology, they say that the most powerful thing that you have in your life is the flashlight of your attention, right? And as a neuroscientist, I love that, because whatever you pay attention to, your brain commits cells to it, right? So just by paying attention to that, your inner critic, or we call it your gremlin, you're actually energizing it. And the whole thing is, it's always going to be there. And I think that the approach to it is not, is this thought right or wrong? Because then people can get, yes, I am shit, blah, blah, blah. Is this thought helping? And if it's not helpful, you shift your attention to something else, right? You talked about some more positive thoughts. We talk about your inner sage, right? Which is the best version of you, that is that person who takes the risks, who does all of this stuff, right? So that attention thing, I think, is just hugely important. Now, this plays that the whole fear, self-doubt thing, procrastination. So that can also hold people back. Sometimes it's fear-based, sometimes it's not fear-based. I mean, so many people just procrastinate their bloody lives away. Have you got any little tips or practical steps that people can take whenever they're procrastinating?
Yes. I want to go back, though, to the inner critic for just 1 second.
Yeah,
When
sure.
That's not helpful. That's the phrase that I chose to say to my inner critic, because I believe in having a conversation with them. My 19-year-old son told his inner critic, "You're not allowed to drive. You're not allowed to touch the radio." Like, he said, "I realize you're going to be with me forever," because we've had lots of conversations. And so he said, "You can't drive. Like, you can sit in the passenger seat, because I know you're going to be with me, and you can say everything you want, but you're not telling me where to go." And I was like, "Oh, I love that."
Can I add something to that? So we talk about your brain's a limousine, and someone always has to drive. Every now and then you notice your gremlin's driving, and you go, "What the hell are you doing driving? You don't have a license unless we're in danger." But you kick it into the back seat and it's still going. And then, because you're in a limousine, you just press the button.
And the window goes up.
That's
I love that. I love the gremlin, because we talk about turning your inner critic into your inner coach. I mean, these are all really similar things. But for me, and I still have it, somebody will say something, and I literally will say, "That's not helpful. That's it. That's not helpful. You can say whatever. I don't care if it's true or if it's not true or whatever. It's not helping me at all." I have friends who have so many different systems. Another friend of mine looks at the joint where the wall meets the ceiling. She's a public speaker, but still very, very nervous when she speaks. And so when she gets nervous, she looks at that joint where the wall and the ceiling meet, and just thinks, where the wall meets the ceiling is a wonderful feeling. Just to ground her.
Attentional control, right? Yeah, bit of grounding.
Whatever it is. For procrastinating, right? It's tough. It's funny, because I have here at my desk, I have my little list every day of everything.
Yeah, nice.
And we all have, right? What do you have?
I got my ritual board right here.
Exactly. There's nothing more satisfying than crossing something off the list.
Correct.
So here's the thing I found with procrastinating. I'm so glad you asked, because when we think of time as a barrier, right? I don't have time. And that's what anybody that procrastinates will say. I'll get to that as soon as I finish this. But this, being the urgent things, never end. The hamster wheel of things, whether it's, emails and phone calls and texts, or school permission slips, or feeding your kid, whatever, it just never ends. And so unless you schedule time, and it seems so easy, you've heard it before, to do the things that are important, that are going to move you towards your values and visions and goals, you can procrastinate all day long. The problem, of course, is how do you schedule that time when everything seems urgent? Things that are urgent have a deadline. Things that are urgent provide a sense of satisfaction. You can check them off your list pretty quickly, right? Things that are urgent will get done eventually because they're urgent. Things that are important get put off. So for me, when it came time to writing the book, I was like, great, I'm a full-time broadcaster, a full-time speaker, a full-time mother of 3, and I've decided to write a book. How's that going to work? So I did the old, I'm going to get up super early every day and spend an hour writing the book, 4:30 a.m., which was great. I got a lot done, and it sucked. It was horrible. I was exhausted by the time I got to dinner time. I had no patience for the kids. If I had to call a game on air that night, I was dead before I even started. So I needed that hour throughout my day. For me, it was 15-minute chunks because that's the most I could do. So I would set the alarm on my phone. Literally, my alarm would go off. The kids hated the sound of that alarm because I would close the door, and maybe they would say, I'm hungry, but hungry isn't urgent, just so you know. So they would say, I'm hungry. And I would say, I bet, which they really hate, by the way, if you say that. Yeah, me too. Same. Any of that they really don't like, but they can wait 15 minutes. And everything got turned off. And I focused on something moving me forward. So for people that procrastinate, you got to give yourself a tiny window, just a tiny window.
I'm a big fan of that. I said, just because my daughter's coming to exams. Now, she just finished her exams. Now, she's been very, very good and very motivated, but there was a couple of days she wasn't motivated. And me and my wife almost at the same time just go, just do 20 minutes. You don't need to be motivated. Just do 20 minutes, right? I think that's, for most people, it's just getting started. And it's basically, when they think about it, when they have got stuff that's really important to do, and if I think back to my time at university, that's when your room is its tidiest, right? That's when all the dishes get done and all the shitty emails get done, because your brain just says, oh, I've got this really important thing to do. I don't want to do it, but I need to be busy. And you do work-like activities, right? You do bullshit stuff that is convincing your brain that you're being productive, and there's a reason why you're not doing this important thing.
You know what's so criminal about that? Here I am, supposedly an expert in this, right? And this weekend, I cleaned out the filters in the washing machine and the dryer. I went through and threw out things, and the kids are like, what is going on? And I said, I have a huge week ahead. And they were like, help me connect those two things, Mom. Help me connect those two things. But I'm telling you, that my laundry room is spectacular right now. But I've still got this huge list of things that I'm doing. There is something about that. Anybody can fall into it. So I told myself, fine, I'm giving myself Saturday and Sunday to do that. And I went into the garage and did that. And then I hit Monday, and it's okay. Here's the thing. I still use a timer, though. I set my timer for 25 minutes. And that last 5 minutes, I get up, I go take the dog for a minute walk. I go make myself a cup of tea, whatever it is. So I know 25 minutes I have to work on this. And then I can take a break, do something else, and either return. This is important. You're saying to your daughter, either return to the same thing, or if that's too overwhelming, return to something else that needs to get done for 25 minutes before I return back. You don't have to grind it all out at once.
Yeah, classic Pomodoro technique stuff, right? That 25-minute blocks. I love that. And then taking a little break and then back into, and hey, turn your goddamn phone off when you're doing your 25 minutes, right?
Absolutely. And your 15 minutes and everything else. Put on noise canceling headphones if you get other people in the house with no noise, just sound, just silence while you work on the
children in a room.
Yes. Yes. Or lock yourself in a room away from the children and the dog.
That'll probably get you in less trouble. So you talk about cultivating an audacious identity. I kind of love the idea of that. So talk us through what is an audacious identity and how do you start to cultivate it? Because I think that identity piece is really, really key. I think when people can get that identity, I am a fit person, I am an active person, I think that's really, really key. So talk about what is an audacious identity and how can you start to cultivate it?
I love that you use the words I am, because I know that I am is such an important part of it. So audacity at first, my parents used to say to me, you have the audacity to ask me that. You're so audacious. So I thought it was a bad word. And then I looked it up, and it was the willingness to take bold, sometimes surprising risks. And I thought, yeah, I can do that. Cultivating, of course, is growing that, because I don't think we're necessarily built with that. Some people more than others, as children, though, as young children, we want to please. So it's not like we're into risk taking as children. And then to make it an identity is the consistent practice of it. So, for example, when I was 11 years old, my father, who was my biggest supporter, said to me at one point, you're getting a little cocky. And it was like a stab wound for me, oh my gosh, cocky. I don't want to be cocky. My poor dad, I held on to that for 40 years. It was just one little comment. I'm 50, I'm writing the book, and I decide one night to look up the definition of cocky, 40 years later, get to this earlier. And it says, so sure of one's abilities that it annoys other people. And I was like, wait a minute. So sure of one's abilities. Yeah. Like when it comes to my work in television, I'm pretty sure I know what I'm doing after all 35 years in television. That it annoys other people. Well, as my teenagers would say, that's OPP. That's other people's problems. Like my confidence is annoying somebody else. And I understand we think of cocky as somebody who's bragging about it, but the actual definition. So then I was like, wait a minute, then I'll take that. And so I think for Audacity and making it an identity, we have to shed some of the ideas we have about Audacity being negative. My sister-in-law, who's from Argentina, said, wait a minute, it's a great thing in Argentina to be audacious. We call that like the best of both worlds. And I said, somehow, at times, Audacity, at least in this country, and you can tell me there, got attached to this kind of braggart, overly confident person who's not very likable. When you shed that, it's easier to take it on as your identity.
I think culturally, there's a significant difference between the US and Australia. Australia, I find in the US, just one of the best things about people in the US is how supportive they are of other people and how supportive they are of people who have become successful. I think that's a great part of American culture. Over here, there's something called tall poppy syndrome. You've ever heard of it?
No.
That as soon as you stick your head as a tall poppy above everybody else, somebody cuts it off. All right. And it is a well-recognized phenomena in Australia, is that tall poppy syndrome. So people tend to kind of keep their heads down for a bit. Whereas in the States, you celebrate people who have gone out there and been successful and are successful in every way. You're fucking, yeah, go you. Whereas over here, they're like, oh, you dickhead, pull your head in.
Yeah. And why is that though? Like when you dig into it, why is it? Is it because you're mad at yourself for not growing to be a tall poppy? Yeah. Is that what it is? And so you want to keep everybody the same?
It is such an interesting, and I don't like it, and lots of people don't like it. I really do. I think I love that part of US culture where you celebrate other people's success and see that as something that's aspirational. I think that's a really healthy part of American culture. Now, when we're talking about all of this, taking risks, audacity, all of that, how important are support networks around there, particularly if you're failing?
Everything. I call it the front row.
Oh, nice.
Front row are the people, and you have to pick your own. You have to cultivate and curate your own front row. I'll tell you who's not in your front row, Paul. It's probably not your mom. It may not be your wife, although she sounds amazing. It may not be your best friend, because a lot of times they want you to stay safe, or they want if you're supporting the family, for example, they want things to be safe. Understand, your front row is made up of the people who are going to push and challenge and pick you up if you're failing and encourage you along the way. But there's an accountability there. And you get a front row in all different areas of your life. I've got a fitness front row where if I don't show up to work out, they're calling me saying, what are you doing? Like, why are you not here today? But your front row in your audacious dreams, the first thing you have to do, and this is where I think a lot of people miss out, you have to tell somebody about it. Tell somebody what it is that you want to do. I was at ESPN 10 full years working before I told anybody I wanted to be on camera. That's how locked up I was with my dreams. And so when you curate your front row, you tell them, hey, this is what I'm going to do. Will you be in my front row? And anybody who's been to one of my talks or has taken one of my workshops knows we use those terms. And when they use them with each other, it becomes very powerful. Will you be in my front row as I embark on this challenge? Then you've got that support system, not just for the failures, but for the successes along the way too, because you have to celebrate those. And sometimes, and I'll leave it here with this, but sometimes the success is in getting a rejection, is in failing at something. Look at you, Paul. You went and did it. You were afraid you were fail. You went out. You did it anyway. Good for you. And that can be the success.
Yeah, awesome. There's so much I love about your front row. What I particularly like about it is it's not just a cheer squad. that you said it's there, that they're to push you, to challenge you, and to hold you to account. I think the other thing I loved about it is the social evidence piece, right? About actually telling people that you're going to do it, then you're much more likely to go and do it, right? Once you've actually got it out there and it's out in the world. And I think the last thing is about that celebrating success. I can't remember who the neuroscientist was, but showed that that when you achieve something, you should actually celebrate it for about 12 seconds, 10 to 12 seconds, which then locks it into the part of the brain, I think the basal ganglia, where it starts to then drive other behaviors. So I think all together, that front row, celebrating success, social evidence, push, challenge, accountability is friggin' awesome. It's a very cool concept. I love the idea of your front row.
Yeah, thank you. It's a fun one. And I actually have my front row that cheered me on through writing the book and everything. They're all coming over Sunday. My family's going to be out of town. And I had someone coming in to teach us a self-defense class. It's about 6 of us because I thought, okay, and what I said to them was, you've been so strong for me this year and pushing me that I wanted to give you a gift of all of us being strong physically together and taking self-defense. The book's not out. I don't know how it's going to be received and this and that yet, but the success was in doing it and then celebrating that with my front row, because it wasn't about the outcome. It was about the action.
Ah, I love that. Not about the, because when I talk to athletes, so I'm the mindset coach for Australia karate athletes, who these guys are trying to get to the Olympic Games. When I talk to them, what consistently comes up that destroys performance is focus on the outcome, focusing on the win, right? Because it just adds another layer of stress. And some light bulb moments were going off, and I'm like, you got to focus on the process, do the work, and then you take the rest as it comes. The outcome will be what it will be. You need to focus on the process. And it sounds like you're of a similar mindset.
Yeah, I love that, because the celebration comes in the work that they did. For me, that's the part I'd want to celebrate. Look how darn hard you worked to be able to do this and accomplish this, not to win this, not to do how hard you trained. There's the celebration.
And I think there is the biggest lesson for any parent out there. And I learned this from Carol Dweck doing a 4-hour workshop. And I know you'll know who she is. But praising effort, never praise outcome, always praise effort, because effort is there. If they put the effort in, obviously, whether they win or lose, it's about the effort, which then cultivates that growth mindset in people.
Yep, exactly. And I have one more thing with parents who are so invested in their kids' sports, and they want to be able to say, great job, honey, you did this after the game. We decided a long time ago, the only thing we were going to say to our children after a game, and we've stuck to it for decades, are you hungry? Are you hungry? The answer is always yes. My son was just in the state championship. It was 4 overtimes. There, they ended up losing in the 4th overtime, sudden death. He's the goalie, finishes, comes over to me. And I said, buddy, are you hungry? And he said, yeah, I am. And he had a big smile on his face, because he was like, at least in the car ride home, I'm not going to have to relive that game. And they know that the outcome isn't the point at all. But by staying totally neutral, you could win. In fact, my other son, when they won the championship, I went on the floor with everybody else celebrating. I hugged him and I said, are you hungry? And he laughed at me. And he said, yeah, I am. Because they just know it's your journey, and we're just here cheering you on and feeding you the whole way. It's worked so beautifully for my family, because it's never about the outcome.
Yeah, that's hugely important, particularly for parents. So for your career, we need to wind up. There's a couple of questions I want to ask you, right? So, and you can take these in any order. One is, for your career, what was the most audacious career move? Or maybe 2, the one that came off and the one that didn't, if you can think about that. And then I just want to pick your brain about, commenting on sport, on high-level sport for so many years. What were there any standout lessons from either individuals that you watched or interviewed in terms of what to do and what not to do? Like, does anything really stick in your mind? I'm sure there's so many of them, but what really pops to your mind? So take those last two questions in any order.
Perfect. I'll start with the second one. That's all we always learn in journalism. And the double barrel question, you take the last one first. So what I learned from watching and being in the boardrooms and locker rooms of the most elite coaches in American sports is that to be a really good leader, you need to be a shape-shifting leader in order to weave individuality into a powerful group culture. And that means knowing not just your people, but yourself. What are your philosophies? How do you like to receive feedback? Who is in your front row professionally? Who's going to have your system still in place when you're not around? I think being a shape-shifting leader in terms of training, in terms of working as a teammate, has been one of the things that's really struck me in the most successful teams. Lots of flexibility.
Cool.
As for a career move that worked, it was very clear for me the first time I really got myself kind of lit up about Audacity. I was living in Bristol, Connecticut, very snowy place, the snowiest winter in like 100 years in 1994, and I'm shoveling myself out. And I took a trip to Southern California to visit my brother in February. And I arrived in Southern California and watched everybody playing beach volleyball. And I thought, what am I doing? Like, what am I doing? And I went back at ESPN's headquarters and went to my boss and said, hey, I want to be LA bureau producer. And he said, well, we already have an LA bureau producer. And I said, I know, that's what makes this conversation so awkward. And said, well, I tell you what, I didn't want to take away the LA producer's job. I wanted to add another one. And he said, well, I tell you what, give me 2 more years and we'll see how it goes. And if by then you haven't become LA bureau producer, then you can quit and move on. And what will you have really lost? And I thought, well, 2 years in my 20s. So I gave him my notice. He called me impatient. I said, yes, you're right. I'm impatient. Gave him my notice for however much time he needed. And I left and I moved cross country and they called me crazy. I mean, it was a fantastic job. When I arrived 5 days later in Southern California, not knowing what I was going to do, I knew I wasn't going to shovel snow, but I didn't know what I was going to do. And this, by the way, ties back to reckless versus worth it, because I was only worried about myself. I didn't have a family then. So that's what made this worth it for me. It would have been terribly reckless if I did it later in my life. When I arrived back, ESPN hired me back to do a few things. At the end of the year, I had doubled my ESPN salary by making that move. And I was playing beach volleyball with my pager on the net. And I learned then that by making a move that was not motivated by money, it was motivated by my life, because people always want to talk about their job. And I say, your job is only a part of your life. What do you want your days and nights to look like? When I started thinking about my life and what I wanted it to look like, my job got better. My salary doubled. I was more fit because I was playing beach volleyball year round, and I was a happier person. And that's when I really learned that the 2 lives, the one you're living and the one you wish you were living, they're possible if you're able to filter out everything else that doesn't interfere with that one goal.
That is friggin' awesome. I just thought, as you were talking there, 2 things just popped into my head as this subtitle of your book, right? Cultivating Audacity. Subtitle number 1, if you're not living on the edge of the envelope, you're taking up too much room, right? And subtitle number 2, which will probably be the subtitle of my next book, Cultivating Audacity, subtitle number 2, because no one's coming to sort your shit out.
Oh, I love it. I love it. And I love that will be your book, because nobody is coming to save you.
Yeah,
Nobody's
that's right.
You're miserable. I mean, if you're not happy with your life, what does that feel like to everybody around you? And what are you doing? What are you doing if you're not enjoying? I understand not everybody has the same gifts in the same situation. So it's just about improving whatever situation you're in a way that lets you be more open and contributing to the world. Because that's what you're supposed to be doing, is contributing joy somehow.
Absolutely. 100%. And I often say, particularly when I hear people complain, I go to myself, that scientists reckon that your chances of ever being born are about 1 in 400 trillion. Start bloody acting like it, right?
Wow.
And if you want to start acting like it, get this book, Cultivating Audacity, by Anne-Marie Anderson. Now, I believe it's not out yet. Anne-Marie, is it on pre-order on Amazon?
It's on pre-order at Amazon. It's available January 1st, 2025, but you can pre-order it now and just start learning a little bit about Audacity and follow me on Instagram and such, where I'm giving little previews.
And actually, this may be out at around the exact time, so it may actually be on order, depending on the release date of this. So other than Cultivating Audacity, getting it on Amazon, where else can people go? Website, if they want to book you for speaking, Instagram, any of the socials, just let us know.
Thank you. My website is AnneMarieAnderson.com, ANNE. On Anne. You can find me also on Instagram, Anne-Marie Anderson TV, or Cultivating Audacity on Instagram, Facebook, all the same things as well. And I'd love to hear from you. I'm pretty good about responding to people. I love getting people lit up about their lives, and Cultivating Audacity, I give real systems, real steps to get you there. It's not just sitting back and dreaming about what you want your life to look like. It's how to get from here to there.
Yeah, I love it. Absolutely love it. And many, many people need to read that book. Anne-Marie, thank you for your time and your expertise, and for actually taking all of that expertise in your career and putting it into one manual for life that people can use to get to where they want to be.
Thank you so much for having me on. A fascinating discussion. I really enjoyed talking with you.